All right, good morning, folks, and welcome to our session this morning, The Future of Ohio's Workforce. We're excited. We have a discussion with Ohio Department of Education and Workforce Leadership queued up. Folks are still filing in, so we'll give them just maybe another 10 or 15 seconds, and then we'll formally get started. But thank you so much for joining us. All right. Well, without further ado, good morning. I'm Quentin Sufren. I'm a senior advisor with Excel in Ed. If you aren't familiar with Excel in Ed, we're a national nonprofit that works with governor's offices, legislators, state partners, and others across the nation to advocate for student-centered state policies that can really improve outcomes for all learners. This particular webinar is focused on pathways, of which I've had the privilege to work on over the past 7 years at Excel in Ed. And so we'll be focused on education to workforce pathways and a topic that I think we're all excited to explore more deeply, which is the future of Ohio's workforce. Before we get to our conversation, which will be the bulk of our session this morning, I wanted to do a bit of table setting. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. Hopefully everyone can see my screen, but just for our session this morning, wanted to kind of walk through our agenda that we've laid out today. One, obviously, just a quick welcome and introduction from us and a little bit about why this webinar, why now, why Ohio. After all, ExcelinEd is a national org, but we care deeply about Ohio and have worked closely with partners on a range of issues, including pathways over a number of years. And towards that end, we've had the privilege of working with partners, Ohio Excels, over the past couple of years to do some deep dives into the pathways space. And so wanted to provide, just as table setting more than anything, kind of an overview of the work that we've done and some context for the pathways ecosystem in Ohio, including opportunities, some challenges, and some considerations that folks might think about as they seek to improve this work. Based on what we've seen in terms of folks joining us this morning, again, welcome. We have a wide range of folks, both from Ohio and nationally, so we're excited to hear from you. Our conversation will transition after that brief summary of the work that we've done and some of the table setting there, and really dig in with Director Stephen Varner and Deputy Director, newly confirmed Deputy Director Jeremy Varner. And we will have time for Q&A. Just a note that please use the Q&A function at that point. I believe the chat is disabled, so that's not going to be open for this particular session. But please use the Q&A feature. And if you will, if you post a question, please put your name and your organization. Just it helps as we try to orient responses and make sure that we're responding to your question the best way possible. And then finally, some closing. But without further ado, we will transition into our work here in Ohio and kind of why this webinar and why now. And I think one of the things that we are most excited for, and we see and work with folks across the country on this work and pathways, is that it is a sustained moment, I think, for pathways in terms of the number of folks who have come together and really are pushing forward and trying to improve outcomes for learners, and not just in the K-12 space, but across post-secondary and into the workforce. And one of the reasons for that is really the basis for our work in this space, which is our framework of policies called Pathways Matter. And that is, we hear from all sorts of stakeholders that they want to see young people, adults, learners, everyone be more prepared for what is an evolving job market. We're seeing huge opportunities within states, within their economies, and particularly within Ohio. It's been a lot of exciting news over the past couple of years. in terms of the employment and new industry and emerging sectors that are really taking off. But that challenge of making sure people are prepared to really engage and engage fully and benefit from these opportunities is still a critical uh, component and challenge for many states. And so tackling this education to workforce pipeline is really one of those key areas for Ohio and for others. It's important to at least note on the front end that when we are talking about pathways, that term gets bandied around quite a bit. And just wanted to clarify that when we talk about a high quality pathway, we are talking about these pathways that begin in K-12. They span some sort of post-secondary experience. Doesn't necessarily need to be a 4-year degree, but some sort of post-secondary training or workforce training and on into the workplace. And in terms of learners, they create some invaluable connections between what's going on in their classroom, in their school, and sometimes even outside of the classroom and the world of work, and really directly tying those experiences to their aspirations, to the exploration of careers that they might want to pursue, and helping them hone their skills, their knowledge, and their experiences to tailor that to really a pathway that's going to include a lot of different training experiences and opportunities that include mastering core academic knowledge, gaining those industry technical skills, also those employability skills that we hear a lot about, those soft skills, durable skills, call them what you will. But bottom line, they are increasingly important as we ensure that learners are prepared for the workplace. And at the same time, really adding to the diploma, right? This idea of not just graduating or moving on to the next step with just a piece of paper, but we're talking about earning currency for the future in terms of credentials of value, whether they be industry or post-secondary, and also having those work-based learning experiences. But bottom line, this is about making sure that folks can aspire and then have the agency to pursue careers of their passion, of their choosing, that are going to allow them to achieve economic security in the long term. And so our work in Ohio has been done in partnership, close partnership with Ohio Excels. And over the past couple of years, we sought to kind of understand, given the fact that there has been so much activity in Ohio, kind of where are the opportunities, where are the challenges, and where is the work yet still to come when we think about the pathway ecosystem in Ohio. And so we looked at a few things. One, just kind of the overall ecosystem, and then two, a deeper dive into areas in which we know the state and a lot of stakeholders and practitioners and partners are working at the local and regional level to push forward these ideas of work-based learning, these experiences, and also the longstanding state practices around industry credentials. We know that these can offer, again, that additional currency, if you will, to learners as they move beyond the K-12 space and into post-secondary in the workforce. So we looked at really those kind of one high-level area and then two specific deep dives and trying to understand kind of where Ohio is and where it can go from here. Very briefly, at a high level, we used our kind of pathways matter framework and worked with our partners to understand the foundation that Ohio has. And I think first and foremost had to recognize the slew of initiatives and investments that have come over the past several years and more to really build an infrastructure of which we think Ohio has a strong infrastructure for pathways. Everything from tech cred, from the micro-credential assistance program to Choose Ohio First and the grad requirements. More recently, and not on this list, are significant investments in career and technical education, brand new emerging initiatives over the past couple of years in the area of semiconductor manufacturing, 5G and broadband partnerships, et cetera. I mean, I could go on. There's a lot of work that's happening. And, from that work, we wanted to understand kind of like as a whole, how does that really create a systemic approach to supporting all learners equitably in these pathways. So one thing we can say is Ohio has not been resting on its laurels. Even so, there are some big challenges that we identified, not the only ones, but some big ones that do remain. And one is we would just call out as data. Ohio, going back over a decade, has some pretty stringent data privacy laws, which we absolutely understand the importance of data privacy, but at the same time, it's been a roadblock into understanding how well some of these policies are working as students transition beyond K-12 and into post-secondary in the workforce. So really, a key challenge for the state is how can they kind of respect that data privacy, but at the same time, do what a lot of other states are doing and trying to connect that data across K-12 and into those other sectors to really understand what is the return on investment, not just in terms of dollars, but in terms of learners and communities and families and the time and effort that they're putting into these pathways to really understand whether or not they're paying off. And second, like a lot of states, there are a lot of programs and pathways on offer. And I think one of the hardest things, especially when you have some data challenges, is really understanding whether or not all of those pathways, whether those programs, whether they're CTE or other, are really consistently prioritizing the highest value outcomes and the highest value in terms of employers in the labor market for economies. And so it is a challenge. There's a lot on offer, and I think that there's a huge opportunity as we move forward to consider those. In the credentialing space, we did a deep dive here, and like a lot of states, Ohio has prioritized industry credentials as being an important outcome associated with students in their pathways. Again, this idea of making sure that they have more than just the graduation or the diploma and the mortarboard as they walk across the stage. But we sought to look at the state's credentials and understand kind of this idea of alignment and with employer demand. And so we looked at a couple of questions. One, the state's promoted credentials, are they aligned with employer demand? And two, are the ones that students are actually earning, so not just the promoted ones, are they aligned with employer demand? And by that, we partnered with Lightcast, which looked at job postings and job scrapes of requirements for those job postings. The key findings, and this is something that a lot of states are struggling for, are really that there is significant misalignment between the credentials promoted and earned. Some of those factors are really around, employers either not demanding or maybe not recognizing some of the credentials on offer. So, upwards of 70% of the promoted credentials were just not really being asked for in job postings. That could also be an employer signaling issue in terms of our employers really asking for what they want and being very clear about the credentials that they need. The second is really around general career readiness. We saw a lot um, of credentials being earned by learners that were really in that lower level kind of, base tier of credentials. So, workplace safety, basic first aid, et cetera. But how can they also earn those higher level credentials? Because right now, even though they're just 3% of the list itself, those general career readiness make up over a third of what students are actually earning. And then finally, this issue of oversupply. There are just a very small number of credentials on the list that are being earned in very large volumes. And so that creates a lot of oversupply. So those students are just earning a lot more credentials than the market can support, at least according to what employers ask for. So again, not an unusual result, but I think as states are really fine-tuning their approaches to pathways, it is an ongoing challenge in this space, and one that Ohio, has on its plate as well. And finally, we looked at work-based learning. And this is an area I think that every state, including Ohio, has prioritized as being just critical. This idea of having those direct and close connections to the world of work, and also creating that relevance for students and learners so that they understand what they're studying, what they're doing, and where they're learning actually has an impact on what they might do in the future. And so we partnered with, again, Ohio Excels, but also Workmorphus to kind of understand the state of work-based learning in Ohio, talked with a lot of passionate stakeholders who were really giving of their time and passionate about seeing these opportunities expand more broadly and equitably to students. And the key findings were both important and I think an inflection point, not just in a state like Ohio, but so many others where they are really trying to push forward work-based learning in greater scale. And that is one that everybody is behind this. There's not a person who does not see this as a critical and important set of experiences that students need to have. But making that accessible is just a very critical challenge for everyone. And that's because it is not a statewide endeavor. It is a regional endeavor. It requires partnerships from a lot of different folks to actually make it work and across sectors, right? We're not just talking about education. We're talking about employers, workforce, intermediaries in some cases who do the yeoman's work of making those connections. Employer engagement and mentorship, also critical. Making sure that students are ready, making sure that employers are ready and understand the roles and responsibilities of work-based learning. One thing we did find that is an opportunity is that the policies on the state books could be easier to navigate in terms of kind of how they relate to what's available, what counts as work-based learning, and so forth. And then finally, a common theme, whether it's Ohio or other states, is really this idea of it's the small things that matter in work-based learning. Yes, having those partnerships and experiences are important, but making sure that there is transportation, there's the capacity to support learners as they make these connections, that there's funding available to make this possible. Everything down to ensuring that the master schedules in schools can support these things. So there is a lot of work that is happening and a lot of work that we heard from stakeholders, very passionate ones again, about how there needs to be more support and more broader engagement across the whole cross-sector partnerships to make this happen. So in terms of policy recommendations, we see them as opportunities. Obviously, we want to say that there's an opportunity to make those connections and data to really understand the ROI of career pathway programs. That would then allow some additional information to be made available around increasing access and promoting those that are of the highest value to learners in the economy. And then finally, really putting the incentives behind that in terms of the target funding that could be leveraged. So some of the tiered funding that's in place, how do we leverage that to really promote those outcomes that are the most aligned with the success that you want to see? And then in the industry credentials and work-based learning space, issues of addressing alignment. And also, one of the things that we have found is that elevating the role of post-secondary credentials in this space is becoming an important factor. We've seen states who really try to rely solely on industry credentials, and that can be a challenge given that the sectors themselves are not equally represented by industry credentials. So how can post-secondary credentialing take place in that space to really fill some of those gaps? And on the work-based learning is just, a huge opportunity to bring everyone together to start to invest in some of that local capacity and have a unified, statewide, vision that can drive this forward. Because again, there's huge passion in Ohio, and we're excited to see it, and believe that this is one of those spaces that we can really see that progress being made. So that is a very quick summary, and about as much as we want to spend on kind of the work that's been done, because we know that there is work going and moving ahead already, and that this is a transformative time in many ways for the agency. We look at states across the nation and are excited to see some of the real innovation that's happening in the governance space around the establishment of the Department of Education and Workforce, and we are super excited to be joined and hear from the work that is happening and will happen as we go forward. So we are joined by Director Stephen Dackin, and Deputy Director Jeremy Varner, I think, is having some technical issues, but he should jump right back on. But a very quick intro. Steve's bio is extremely impressive, so I'm going to condense it, but understand that there is over 40 years of work in Ohio in education across a range of roles and experiences, everything from superintendent to state board to higher ed that Director Dackin has held, and he brings a passion that we are excited to see move forward. So, first of all, welcome and thank you. And Jeremy Varner, who is the new deputy director, recently unanimously confirmed by the Senate. So congratulations there of career technical education and workforce. Brings over 15 years of experience from the state of Iowa, so maybe newish to Ohio, but certainly not new to this space, and has overseen a range of initiatives, everything career technical to some higher ed as well. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's really a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Quentin.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to kick it off, Director Dackin, with you, if that's okay. I mean, I provided, an introduction of some of the work that Ohio has done, but there's a lot of work happening. And I think, we want to focus, as the future is now, like, really kind of thinking about that work. And obviously, you're the director, not new to Ohio, but director of a new agency, and really a new day in some cases, I would say, with a lot of opportunities. And would love to hear kind of from you first, like where do you feel Ohio's opportunities and challenges lie in ensuring that K-12 learners have a high quality experience and pathway?
Yeah, Quentin. Well, first of all, thanks to you and thanks to ExcelinEd and Patricia and all the folks there, as well as Ohio Excels. Ohio Excels has been a huge partner for a long time, with not only with the agency, but with all things workforce in Ohio. And appreciate Lisa Gray's leadership there. And by the way, for folks who do not know, Ohio Excel is a 501c3 that is actually an extension of the Ohio Business Roundtable, which consists of some of the state's largest employers, and they've been a great ally in all this as well. Ironically, Jeremy and I just came from the Ohio Chamber of Commerce this morning, where we had a little coffee, greet, and meet thing. But we're cultivating those relationships. I will say this about Ohio. First of all, our future is really bright in Ohio. We have really good policy in place. And the work that you've done with Ohio Excels over the last couple of years, the roadmaps you just kind of showed, is going to become in part our blueprint for how we move forward. I mean, you rightfully identified a number of our strengths that we have, and also identified the challenges that we face. And we're ready to take those head on. In fact, we've been working on some of those challenges with our legislative friends and the governor's office. The good news here in Ohio, and I need to say this up front, we do this in collaboration with a whole lot of folks, but I can certainly learn from our colleagues from other states. And so always welcome that opportunity to work across state boundary lines. You saw that we have Jeremy in here from Iowa, but we can learn a lot from each other. And so we don't come here with all the answers, but we want to be part of the solution. So saying that up front, we're really at kind of an inflection point where we, as I said, we have the good policy in place. This last biennium budget, historic investments were made in workforce for K-12. We had millions of dollars invested in expansion of facilities for career tech centers in our state, so they can accommodate more kids in their programs. We had a career technical equipment grant competition that largely focused on non-career tech schools to expand pathway opportunities in traditional school districts. So all that was really, really good, on top of a huge investment in literacy, which has been kind of the stake in the ground that Governor DeWine has made. But in the governor's State of the State speech a few months ago, he talked about two things related to workforce. He talked about what you've just said, Quinn. Every student, and this is his language, every student should be on a pathway to something in high school. So he kind of put a marker down saying pathways matter. Every kid should be on a pathway, not just some. And so we're obviously taking up on that. The second thing he asked for in the state of Spain, he asked the legislature to add career planning to the already graduation plan requirement that every student has to have. And as most people realize, graduation plans are really an exercise in credit attainment. There are some nuances in our graduation requirements that do allow kids to demonstrate competency in workforce related areas, but largely it's an acquisition piece. So having career planning as part of a mandated requirement for all students matter. I would like to add into that and a way to pay for it because we don't give that kind of information to kids largely in school and their parents on the ROI on a particular post-secondary plan, whether it's college, whether it's delaying post-secondary training, going right into the workforce. There needs to be those conversations in addition to labor market data that needs to be part of all that. And so part of our career planning platform will include that as a component of it moving forward. The governor and lieutenant governor have been champions of career technical education in our state, advocating for it. We are now at the point where we want to bring career tech to kids. And like a lot of states, many kids leave a comprehensive high school to go to someplace else to get career technical education. In the case of Ohio, we have, I think, 55 career tech centers. That number might be wrong, so I might want to walk that back. But we have career tech centers that are actually jointures of school districts, and so kids often have to leave their high school to go to avail themselves to career technical education. So we want to bring that to schools, to all schools, so kids have it in their schools. And I will say this, because this is a really important stat that I keep saying here again and again. Every given year in Ohio, we have about 136,000 kids who enter high school as a freshman. And if you fast forward 8 years later, 69% of those kids who enter, or about 94,000 kids each year, do not get a 2 or 4 year degree 8 years after they enter high school. And so for us, many of our comprehensive high schools are preparing kids for the university experience, which is what the large percentage of those kids are not going to experience in mass. Do we need more kids to go to post-secondary? Absolutely, if it is the right pathway for them. And if it kind of gives them the kind of information and return on investment that makes sense for them. So that's kind of where we're at. We're going to busy working with the legislature. Legislation's been slow in Ohio for the last few months. Today, ironically, is the last day that the legislature will probably be in session for the remainder of the calendar year. Perhaps they may come back after November for lame duck. But so we've got some things routine up for the next biennium budget, which our process will begin in January of 2025. That's when the as introduced budget will be put in. The great thing that we have for us right now at the state that we are part of the governor's cabinet. So I report to the governor. And that has really streamlined a lot of things for us around policy, access. And we have this, I go back to this inflection point and why I think the future is so bright. So we really do have an alignment. The moons have aligned in Ohio around employer engagement. We have all the big employer organizations on board. We have support in the Senate and the House, and we have the support of the governor and lieutenant governor and a host of other organizations. So people are getting the message that making sure kids are on a pathway that realizes the kind of credentials that matter in the workforce. Your recommendations couldn't be more spot on in terms of how we want to move forward. We knew the industry credential list was not where it needed to be. And so we'll be taking that on. Probably that'll be one of the first things that we do with the governor's office of workforce transformation is redo the list. As you well know, that's not easy, but we've got the stamina and the courage to take it on. Yeah, so one of the things that I think is important for us is that Site Selection Magazine identified Ohio as the sixth best state, the sixth best business climate in 2022. And then they when they looked at what employers were saying, why, but there are two major concerns with that. One was workforce skills, and the second one was workforce development. So that's why the lieutenant governor and the governor and our agency and other agencies are all about figuring out how we expand these pathway opportunities. So it isn't a question about if we're going to do it, it's a question of how we're going to do it and how well we're going to do it. And so that's why I was searching. So let me back up. So when the new agency was created in House Bill 33 in the last biennium budget, it called for a director that reported directly to be appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate, and then 2 deputy directors to be appointed by the director, confirmed by the Senate. And so the first thing I jumped on was the deputy director of workforce, because that's the area that we wanted to highlight and get up and get make sure that we got somebody on the ground floor running. And I am so glad to be able to land with Jeremy. His portfolio, his skill set is just exactly what Ohio needs. And so I'm excited that he'll be able to share some of his thoughts about where we are on this. But we have, Quentin, a partnership first approach in the agency. We have to do this locking arms with partners throughout our state. We do have infrastructure in our state where there are regional partnerships and community-based partnerships, but we don't have a statewide framework about how that might happen. And so that's something I'm interested in having conversation with folks. But we have really good policy in place. I'm going to give you a couple examples. We have credit flex in our state. So we can award credit to kids based on experiences they have both inside the school and outside the school, which sets us up perfect for work-based learning. And then we have innovation waivers in our state, which allows a district to apply to the department for a waiver for certain regulations or rules, even in some cases law, that would allow them to do what they feel like they need to do to get the outcomes that they're looking for. And so those are 2 examples. And then we have a couple of infrastructures in place that you mentioned in one of the slides, industry sector partnerships. We also have business advisory councils. Every district is required to have a business advisory council, and they have to submit their reports annually to the department in terms of how they've worked with their district and what they've identified as outcomes and so on. So, and then we have a whole lot of stuff like College Credit Plus and C-tags and things like that. So we're really positioned. It's like any other state that has home rule as the primary approach to education. Our local boards of education, we have 611 school districts who have all local elected boards of education. Then we have 700 plus charter non-public and community schools and things like that. So we have a vast array of governance structures in our state, and it's all locally regulated. The only exception to that is literacy in our state, where the governor and the legislature said, "Thou shalt do the science of reading," and we are really happy about that particular thing. But the home rule is always a challenge because it's up to the local districts to do this. And so incentivizing the behavior they want, creating a sense of urgency, creating will, helping them with technical assistance, that's all responsibility of the agency in collaboration with a whole lot of other folks. And I'll stop talking for now because I've rambled incessantly.
No, that's great. And I think you pointed out some critical pieces of infrastructure that are there, and particularly with the idea that, we're really trying to see learners have those experiences elsewhere, not just in the classroom building. But yes, just like pathways, which are very intensely local and regional initiatives, you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the structures that are also in place at the local level. Jeremy, I'd love to hear from you now. I mean, obviously, as I mentioned, you're not new to this space if you're a little new to Ohio, but love to get your perspective coming in fresh and really thinking about the opportunities that you see that lie ahead.
Hey, thanks, Quentin. So first, thanks to the Ohio XLs and XLNN teams in putting together these reports and for all your work. These really are great reports, and they give me a lot to work from so I can hit the ground running. Iowa and Ohio have a lot in common, and not just in terms of the number of vowels. They have very similar kinds of issues, very similar educational governance and whatnot. And we're struggling with the same issues, right? We need a better prepared workforce so we can maximize opportunities for economic growth and the standard of living for the residents of our state. Students deserve nothing less than a real shot at the American dream. That's what this is really about, right? During my 19 years at the Iowa Department of Education, I led workforce preparation efforts K-14, so middle school career and academic planning, secondary CT, post-secondary CT, the community college office, and whatnot. And in that, I focused on a few fundamental principles. First, we're all interested in ensuring that students are skilled and competitive in the global economy. Everybody benefits from that. Second, that trusted stakeholder partnerships are the basis for making and maintaining effective change. If we really want this work to happen on the ground in a meaningful way, we are this home rule state. And third, we need to constantly interrogate our data to inform policy and practice. So look, I'm just coming into my second week. I got my badge this morning, so I'm gonna speak in kind of general terms, right? But as Director Dackin said, there's a great foundation of efforts. We have a great policy framework in the state, and there's a lot of energy to make a difference, right? I wouldn't have come to the state unless I saw a real opportunity to make a difference in this area. So I'm really excited. And there is a lot we can do with career pathways. I think the reports that you outlined highlight some of those opportunities. We know career pathways work starts early with career exploration and planning, and that needs to be supported by adults who inspire, guide, plan. So the infrastructure of counselors, career coaches or navigators, educators, employer partners, they all make a difference in this. And I was really excited about Governor DeWine talking about adding career planning to the academic planning components that are there. This is intrinsically tied together. It's something we need to get done. But beyond career and academic planning, we need high quality CTE programs that are leading to good careers accessible to students in every zip code. Students need to be leaving with skill sets for lifelong learning that are going to carry them through different economic periods, through career changes, and lead to a good quality of life. They need pathways with credentials of value that are hopefully stackable, that are meaningful to both students and employers. And we need outcomes data, right, to really tell us what career pathways are the highest value, and we need to align our policy and practice locally to best emphasize those things. My sense is we need an all-hands-on-deck effort, and we need to be as efficient and effective as we can with the resources we have, so we can ensure that every student can reach their highest potential. So I'm really excited about the recommendations that are here and ready to work on them all with our partners.
Great, thank you. And we're excited to see and really happy that you're going to be part of this work. Director Dackin, would love to kind of get a sense from you, obviously it's not just a new agency. This is a combined agency that is really, and we're seeing more states really think about this more in a way about how can we maybe reduce some of the silos that are out there in terms of creating these opportunities. Now, obviously, your portfolio is much larger than just pathways. It is, the whole of education and the whole of workforce. But I'm curious as to how do you feel like this new integrated or combined agency, I don't know the best way to describe it, how does that factor into providing better support for schools, districts, employers, partners? Because it really is something that we're seeing more states tackle and as a critical link for creating more of those connections.
Yeah. So I think a couple things related to that. First of all, I was really excited when the legislature and the governor's office talked about the possibility of this, even as long ago as a couple of years ago. This is not a new conversation in Ohio about how do we reduce silos, how do we integrate what we're doing. I think the first thing for us starts with our own agency, because we have two deputy directors by statute, one for workforce and CTE, one for primary and secondary education. So we have the potential to have our own silo here, and we're not going to do that. These two things will be purposely integrated with each other. In fact, we've had some conversations about how we can incorporate some of the competencies that are in many of our CTE programs into our academic content standards, as an example. So that's going to be first and foremost, what can we do as an agency to ensure that it's not a bifurcated system? Because that's been the traditional approach. If you're not going to college, then you do CTE. That's always kind of been a mentality in Ohio. And we want to eradicate that by our own behavior as an agency. And we also are working with our other agency partners, our other directors, like Job and Family Services, the Ohio Department of Higher Education, our newly created Department of Children and Youth, the Ohio Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation, as a starting point, getting us in a room as cross agencies and really work on all things workforce across agency. So we have a cross agency and eventually a cross sector. I just learned some things from the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections about what they're doing in workforce with restored citizens that I didn't even know about. I mean, and so that's a good example of how if we start anywhere, we got to start there. And then we bring in cross-sector partnerships from business and other interested parties. You made a recommendation about a council of sort. That could be that kind of precursor to that. I think part of the benefit that I have just personally, and I think Jeremy shares this, is that I spent 8 years in higher ed. I spent, years in K-12 as superintendent. I spent time on workforce-related committees with employers and chambers and et cetera. So I kind of get how the system can work. I understand how it does work now. And we have a ton of silos out there. Ohio has a lot of random acts of improvement. We have people doing good things that we want them to do. But our challenge, I think, is the challenge that most states have, and that's how do you get scale? Well, the only way I can figure out in my head is that you have to do it through a partnership lens. And so regional partnerships or community-based partnerships, to me, is a holy grail. Here in Central Ohio, when we talk to our employers in Central Ohio when I was at the college, and we talk about work-based learning, employers would unequivocally say to us, we don't want 46 school districts knocking on our door to figure out how we can get kids internships and job shadows, et cetera, et cetera. So there has to be some sort of, I always use this word, it's an over-academic word. I don't like using it, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head better. But we have to have some intermediate function. Somebody who's sitting in between the employer, higher ed, and K-12, the education and the business folks, who can help with the matching, can help with the transactional nature of work-based learning. We can't put that on employers solely. We can't put it on K-12 or higher ed solely. So there has to be skin in the game for all. And fortunately, in Ohio, we have examples of that in Ohio, and we just need more of it. And then I'll say something just about the other priorities real quick, because I think all these are workforce. I mean, the whole notion of literacy and making sure that every kid can read at or above grade level as they matriculate to the system, that's a workforce readiness strategy. Imagine an economy that had all kids reading at or above grade level as they graduate from high school. And then making sure that kids have the supports necessary to be successful in school through wellness initiatives. Our government's been very clear about that. We have now, we had full bipartisan support to require school boards to adopt a policy regarding cell phone use. The department put out a model policy that would prohibit cell phone use during the school day as a model. Now, in Ohio, they don't have to do that, but they do have to have a policy regarding the use of cell phones in our state. And the governor set up a vision strike force. We have kids who are screened for vision problems in our schools, and yet 50% of those kids who screen who have been identified as a potential problem never get a follow-up examination. And those kids who actually get a follow-up examination, there's a huge percentage of those kids who never get glasses. Well, that's a pretty simple problem to solve. And so the governor has said, we know what the problem is. Now we got to figure out how to get kids glasses. So anyway, those are just some examples of supports that we're doing in the school. And then we've got a great partnership with our CTE associations who have committed to work with us to help provide supports to comprehensive schools who want to do pathways, because what we have found, at least what I found, my own experience has been, many principals, high school principals, do not know the language of CTE. They're not familiar because it's not what they do every day. They're not familiar with what they can and cannot do around CTE implementation. And so having folks who are in that world provide that kind of technical assistance to our school districts really is going to matter. And so we're going to continue to roll that out in our state so we can be more aggressive around pathway implementation. Jeremy, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's a great summary. We've got a lot to do. I will say with work-based learning, it's something we're really excited to dig into. We know we need to think conceptually about that full spectrum of activities. How do we make sure we're capturing everything with data in terms of data so we can show all of that? And how do we make it simple for stakeholders to understand, right? So that they're able to implement that. And how do we ensure that we got that capacity to do that brokering that Director Dackin talked about? Just want to throw those pieces on.
Yeah, and we're also going to the recommendations that have been made in the report. We're also going to identify those pathways that may have greater value in the workforce and be able to make sure that people know that. It's the ROI. That's why I said about the career planning. I want to have a way for people to understand how to pay for it. So all this is about making sure that people understand what they maybe don't have access to right now. And I think we have some really good ways that we're going to get that done.
Yeah, that's a great segue. And by the way, for folks who want to submit a question, please do so in the Q&A. There is one question, and it does have to do with data that's been put in there, and that is, one is this is from Michelle in Akron, and she's very grateful for the transparency and the discussion today, so sends her thanks. And this question is really about how can we, or how can Ohio better collect information from communities about their needs in terms of pathways. Obviously, schools submit a lot of data in terms of administrative, but sometimes that doesn't actually get to the core of some of what families, particularly in low-income communities, and learners need. And so this question is I think getting at, are there plans or are there opportunities that you both see to do that outreach and to collect some maybe more informal data that helps inform kind of the offerings or availability of pathways in those areres?
Yeah, great question. I appreciate the question. Thanks, Michelle, and thanks for your commitment to Ohio. So we've been working over the last couple of years with a number of partners on creating a longitudinal data system in Ohio. The Ohio Educational Research Center at the Ohio State University has been our partner in that. And right now we're working on being able to, the initial charge was we want to be able to understand what kids are doing at least a year out after graduation. Now we have the National Student Clearinghouse, so we know who's enrolled in post-secondary and so forth. But what we didn't know is if they're not in college, what are they doing? We've run a couple of pilots in Ohio over the last year and a half to find those kids. And we had great success in finding them, that was our first challenge is, where are they and how do you do it? Well, we partner with a couple of non-traditional partners, like we have a social media company that we partner with because that's where kids are. They're not in telephones, they're not in email. And we found them, and we did some focus groups and surveys with these kids, asking questions. So how did you get to where you are? What happened while you were in high school? And then what are you thinking now? And what do you aspire to do? I mean, that's kind of a thing. And we learned a lot from them. And essentially what kids told us again and again while they were in high school, they were told two things about their future. One, you have options to go to college or go to the military. That was almost per kid in our data. And that's disheartening for a whole lot of reasons. And then we also learned that many of them just didn't see the value of a college degree. And part of it is that again, they don't have information on, this kind of return on investment and how it could be. Not all majors are equal. We all know that, but they don't even have that information. So what we have now, and we now, through some of our ESSER funding, we're standing up a larger pilot that will give us a bigger sample size of what we can do with these kids. This is the workforce part of our agency that goes beyond K-12. And finding out and going after those kids who never enter college. 52% of our kids who graduate from high school never enter college. Or if they do, they stop out. So that's a huge number. So we're learning a lot from that pilot. That's going to inform policy moving forward into the next biennium budget about how we can better serve those kids, both while they're in high school, some of the stuff we've already talked about, and then what can we do with them once they get out and help them get on a trajectory of having a quote unquote good job. We are charged by the Office of Workforce Transformation to define in Ohio what a good job means. So we're in the process of doing that. We looked at our friends at Georgetown and others who have attempted to do things like that in the past, but we are going to come up with a definition for Ohio around what is a good job. So those are some of the things we're looking at. Jeremy, again, anything? Oh, I will say this about Jeremy. One of the things that really attracted us to Jeremy was Iowa's experience with data. So Jeremy, if you want to say a word about some of the things you did in Iowa and how that possibly could be thought about in Ohio.
Sure. So yeah, when we talk about the state longitudinal data system, workforce connections, I led the team that built out the work there in the state across secondary and post-secondary. We were even able to get non-credit job training workforce outcomes. So we were able to follow them in the unemployment insurance records. There's only a couple states that have really figured out how to do that. I'm surprised we do have some unique Ohio context that sort of prevents us from doing everything we might want to do as easily as we might want to do it with regard to data collection. I'm still trying to get my arms around how all of that works. Ultimately, it's really important for us to understand our students' outcomes, right? The educational outcomes, and importantly, the workforce outcomes. It's going to inform our state policy, how we kind of prioritize our opportunities, how we align our policy, but also local practice, right? So if we're able to share with schools and other community stakeholders how students are performing, it will help change their practice in terms of what opportunities they make available to students, and how they think about what they're doing in their own local context. And so I'm really excited about that work. We also know we need to get better work-based learning data. I think we've got some efforts underway to do that. And informal data collection is also important. I'm still getting my arms wrapped around all the things that we have here in the state of Ohio, but excited about what we can do.
Great, thank you both. This question coming in from Melissa in Riverside. She points out that she's super excited and loves this work, but where she is in Northeast Ohio, many schools are struggling to understand how to implement pathways in a traditional environment. Is there, or have you considered a committee or some sort of opportunity to bring people together around establishing programming in a typical comprehensive K-12 school? Obviously, the CTE centers are one thing, but the traditional high school and being able to kind of really offer these opportunities and that flexibility, as you note. Anyway, great question.
Yeah, no, appreciate the question very much, and also appreciate her work in Northeast Ohio. I alluded to this earlier about the emerging partnerships that we have with our CTE associations, particularly CTPDs, and their willingness to assist and partner with us and others to provide this kind of technical assistance to school districts. I talked about principals and sometimes their lack of knowledge of CTE. And so that is certainly a way that we can do that. We also have school support teams that traditionally have worked with districts who are low performing. But there may be a way to also think about that kind of a structure for this particular issue too, because we know we have to do it, and we have to do it. It has to be done well, and it has to be locally delivered. It's not going to come from 25 South Front Street here in Columbus, Ohio. It's got to come from locals who have relationships with people in those districts and so forth. So it's not unlike what we're doing around literacy, where we have literacy coaches on the ground with some of our districts, and we have high quality professional development made available. Same kind of thing can be done here. And so we'll work with people like her and others to get some ideas. The one thing that any agency, I think, can do is really focus on, besides the policy piece and working with our legislature and things like that, but we can be kind of a repository for information, research, tool development, et cetera, things like that, that also could be helpful to school districts to be able, like a how-to guide kind of thing, for example. And we've got a lot of resources on our website. I'm not sure how often people visit the website. I don't have that off the top of my head, but anyway, there's clearly a will on our part to do something different, and that's the point. I kind of jokingly say this, and people sometimes take me the wrong way, but when I was superintendent, we did pathways 14 years ago in Reynoldsburg, and if I'm doing today, I would do them differently because I didn't know everything I needed to know 14 years ago about how to do pathways. But I just knew it was a need. But as a superintendent, I used to have this concept of ready, fire, aim, because we weren't getting it done with all our kids. And so we had to innovate to figure out how to get it done with all our kids. And then we have to have a concept of rapid abandonment if it's not working like we thought it was, and focus on something else. So I encourage people to really be innovative here. And one of the things that I want to do at the department is I want to remove barriers. So if school districts think there are certain things that are keeping them from doing what they need to do, I'm really interested in those conversations about how the agency then can lead in reducing or eliminating things that really truly stand in the way of people doing what we need them to do, kind of thing. So that's one of the things that I think the department can lead on.
Great. We have about 3 minutes left, so time for one more question. And this one gets to, I think, not just around learners, but adults. It's from Chad in Columbus. And he notes that too often career pathways and work-based learning are seen as something for other people's kids, in quotes. How important is it to change that mindset? And how do you see the department really helping to tackle that challenge?
So I'll let Jeremy answer this also, but again, I think it starts with leadership at all levels. Thankfully, we have a lieutenant governor who's made career tech sexy. They're out there talking about it all the time, how we need to expand it. So you've got the leadership of the state, and then I think you've got certainly legislative leadership. That's why we have a workforce in our title now. We're saying the same things. Increasingly, superintendents are saying the same thing. I think this is not meant to be kind of a trickle down thing, but I do think when we can start everybody seeing the value proposition of why this, and this is why this data matters so much, and it's why it's so important to get career counseling into our schools early on, so that we're not only educating the student, but we're educating the parent. If you think about many parents' perception of advanced manufacturing, for example, they think it's a toolbox. Well, no, it's a laptop. That's very different. And too few people have access to that kind of information or experiences about that. And that's up to us as the adults in the system to get that information in the hands of parents and kids so they can do something with it. Because an informed student is going to be more likely to make a good decision for themselves. And right now, we don't give them the kind of information, and we don't tell them that you can go out and do this without maybe a 2 or 4 year degree and make really good money with full benefits and no debt. And many people don't know that many employers will help you get a degree as you enter the workforce. So these things like learn and earn pathways, for example, are a real thing that can reduce debt and increase the career trajectory for young people. So that's my attempt to answer that question. There's a ton of other things I'm sure we can do about it. Jeremy, anything you want to add?
No, I think we're making good progress on the stigma issue, but the reality is we need to help students see the career opportunities that exist. So better career and academic planning, expose them to more work-based learning. So get them out actually seeing, experiencing, and we need high quality programs that students find attractive. When students see a high demand advanced manufacturing program, it looks different than a lower quality CT program, right? And those things students get excited about and are more likely to move into. And it really isn't college or career anymore. Everybody needs something more than high school. And so I think we need to keep messaging on that, and we can start to turn a corner on the issue.
And last word, work-based learning matters. If kids can actually experience the workforce instead of this being this kind of hypothetical or mystical kind of experience, that changes minds also.
I think that's a perfect way to end our session today. Director Dackin, Deputy Director Varner, I know I thank you on behalf of everyone who's attended here today and on behalf of our partners. So we really appreciate this. We will be watching and look forward and obviously be cheering you on as you continue this work forward. And big thanks to everyone who participated. We will be posting a recording of this and the materials as I noted earlier. So watch your email for those. But again, thank you for your time and everyone have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Quentin.
Thank you.
Thank you.